You wake up angry because someone didn't text you back. You lose sleep over what your boss thinks about your presentation. You replay conversations in your head for hours, analyzing every word, every facial expression. Here's the brutal truth. You're drowning in your own need to care about everything, and it's destroying your peace. What if I told you that your misery isn't caused by what happens to you, but by how desperately you cling to outcomes you cannot control? What if the secret to unshakable happiness lies not in caring more, but in caring less? Watch water flow down a mountain. Does it struggle against the rocks? Does it fight the bends in the river? Does it worry about reaching the ocean? Water simply flows. It adapts to every obstacle, moves around every barrier, and finds its way without resistance. When you block water, it doesn't get angry, it finds another path. When you try to contain it, it takes the shape of its container without losing its essential nature. You are not water. You are something far more powerful. You have the ability to choose where your energy goes, what deserves your attention, and what you allow to disturb your inner peace. Yet most of you live like you're at war with reality itself. Your suffering comes from one source, attachment. Not the attachment to people you love, but attachment to outcomes, opinions, and expectations that exist only in your mind. You create elaborate stories about how things should be, then torture yourself when reality refuses to follow your script. The difference between a master and a slave is simple. The master acts without attachment to results. He gives everything to the task at hand, then releases it completely. The slave is owned by his need for specific outcomes. He cannot act freely, because he's already decided what must happen for him to be okay. Which one are you? Right now, as you sit here, how many things are you worried about? How many scenarios are playing in your head? How many people's opinions are you trying to manage? Every single one of these concerns is stealing your power, fragmenting your attention, and making you weak. The ancient warriors understood something you've forgotten. They fought with total commitment while being completely prepared to die. This wasn't morbid thinking. It was the ultimate freedom. When you have nothing to lose, you become dangerous. When you need nothing from the outcome, you become unstoppable. But you've been conditioned to care about everything. Care about your image, care about what strangers think, care about being liked, accepted, validated. You've turned yourself into an emotional weather vane, spinning wildly with every change in your environment. Stop for a moment and feel the weight of all this caring. Feel how exhausting it is to monitor everyone's reactions, to manage everyone's emotions, to make sure everyone approves of your choices. This is not strength, this is slavery disguised as sensitivity. True strength flows like water. It's supple, adaptable, and incredibly powerful, precisely because it doesn't resist what cannot be changed. When you learn to care less about things beyond your control, you free up enormous energy to focus on what actually matters. What actually matters: your actions, your choices, your response to whatever life throws at you. Everything else is just noise. Think about the person you become when you're desperate for someone's approval. You modify your behavior, edit your words, suppress your authentic self. You become a performer in your own life, constantly checking if your audience is pleased. This isn't living, it's a slow death of your true nature. Now think about moments when you truly didn't care what others thought. Remember how free you felt, how authentic you were, how much more alive you became. That's your natural state. Everything else is learned behavior that's making you miserable. The paradox of caring less is that you actually become more effective at everything you do. When you're not paralyzed by fear of failure, you take bolder actions. When you're not seeking approval, you speak your truth. When you're not attached to specific outcomes, you adapt faster when things change. Water never fights the mountain, yet it carves through solid rock, not through force but through persistence combined with complete flexibility. It doesn't care about the mountain's hardness or resistance. It simply continues to flow, and eventually the mountain yields. Your problems are like that mountain. The more you fight them directly, the more they resist. The more you worry about them, the larger they appear. But when you flow around them like water, when you stop making them mean something about your worth or your future, they lose their power over you. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent to everything. Water is not passive, it's one of the most powerful forces on earth. But its power comes from its ability to adapt, to flow, to find the path of least resistance while never losing sight of its destination. You must learn to distinguish between caring about your effort and caring about results. Care deeply about showing up, about giving your best, about maintaining your integrity. But release your grip on how others respond, what outcomes emerge, or whether your efforts are immediately recognized. The person who needs everyone to like them becomes unlikable because they have no authentic self to offer. The person who needs every project to succeed becomes ineffective because they're paralyzed by fear of failure. The person who needs life to be fair becomes bitter because life doesn't care about their expectations. But the person who cares deeply about their craft while remaining unattached to recognition becomes magnetic. The person who gives everything to their work while accepting whatever results emerge becomes prolific. The person who engages fully with life while expecting nothing becomes unshakable. Every morning you wake up with a finite amount of emotional energy. You can spend it worrying about things you cannot control, or you can invest it in actions that actually make a difference. Most people waste 90% of their emotional energy on situations they're completely powerless to change. What would happen if you redirected that energy? What could you create? What could you achieve? What could you become if you stopped caring about everyone else's business and focused entirely on your own? The tragedy is that you already know this. Deep down, you know that your happiness doesn't depend on other people's approval, that your worth isn't determined by your achievements, that your peace comes from within. But knowing and living are two different things. Living like water requires daily practice. It requires catching yourself in moments of desperate caring and asking, is this mine to control? It requires recognizing when you're trying to manage outcomes instead of managing your effort. It requires the courage to disappoint people when being authentic demands it. Most people think caring less means becoming cold or heartless. This is backwards thinking. When you stop wasting energy on things you cannot control, you have more genuine care to offer where it actually matters. When you stop seeking love desperately, you become more loving. When you stop needing respect, you become more respectable. Water doesn't seek to be water, it simply is. It doesn't try to prove its power, it demonstrates it through action. It doesn't fight for recognition. It shapes the entire landscape through patient persistence. You have spent years building an identity around your worries, your needs, your emotional reactions to circumstances. You think this is who you are, but underneath all that psychological noise is something far more powerful. Your essential nature, which is as fluid and adaptable as water itself. The question isn't whether you can learn to care less. The question is whether you're willing to give up the familiar suffering of caring too much for the unfamiliar freedom of strategic indifference. When someone insults you, you can choose to be offended, or you can let their words flow through you like water through a screen. When a project fails, you can choose to see it as a reflection of your worth, or you can see it as information to improve your next attempt. When people don't respond the way you hoped, you can choose to take it personally, or you can recognize that their behavior has nothing to do with you. This is the water way. Not fighting what is but flowing with what is while never losing sight of where you're going. Water doesn't get discouraged by obstacles. It simply finds another path. It doesn't waste time being angry at the rocks. It uses them to create beautiful music as it flows past. Your mind will resist this approach because it's addicted to drama, to problems, to having something to worry about. Your ego will tell you that caring less means caring about nothing, that detachment leads to mediocrity, that you need to maintain control over outcomes to be successful. This is fear talking. The fear that if you stop desperately managing every detail of your life, everything will fall apart. But look around you. Despite all your careful worrying, despite all your attempts at control, life continues to be unpredictable. People continue to act independently, and outcomes continue to emerge according to forces far larger than your personal preferences. The difference is that water-like people navigate this unpredictability with grace. They bend without breaking. They adapt without losing their essential nature. They respond to challenges with curiosity rather than resistance. When you truly understand that happiness comes from within, that your worth is not up for debate, that your peace cannot be disturbed by external circumstances unless you allow it, you become dangerous to those who profit from your insecurity and unshakable in your commitment to your own path. This is not a philosophy for the weak. It takes tremendous strength to care less in a world that profits from your anxiety. It takes courage to remain detached when everyone around you is caught up in drama. It takes discipline to maintain your inner stillness when storms rage around you. But this is the path to genuine power, not the power to control others or outcomes, but the power to remain yourself regardless of circumstances. Not the power to avoid challenges, but the power to flow through them without being damaged. Not the power to eliminate problems, but the power to remain at peace while solving them. Water teaches us that true strength is not rigid, it's flexible. True power is not forceful, it's persistent. True wisdom is not complicated. It's simple adaptation to what is while maintaining clarity about where you're going. The moment you truly embrace this philosophy, everything changes. Not because your external circumstances suddenly improve, but because you stop being a victim of your external circumstances. You become the author of your own experience, writing your story based on your responses rather than your circumstances. People will notice this change in you immediately. They'll see someone who cannot be manipulated by guilt, who cannot be controlled by fear, who cannot be disturbed by drama. Some will be inspired by your freedom, others will be threatened by it. Your response to both will be the same: complete indifference to their opinion of your path. But here's where most people get confused. They think detachment means becoming soft, passive, or weak. They imagine that caring less means fighting less, that flowing like water means surrendering your warrior spirit. This is the biggest misconception about true strength. You can be completely detached from outcomes while being absolutely ferocious in your actions. You can care nothing about what others think while caring everything about excellence. You can flow like water while striking like lightning. The greatest fighters in history understood this paradox. They were most dangerous precisely because they had nothing to lose. Who among you believes that intensity requires attachment? Who thinks you need to be emotionally invested in results to perform at your peak? Stand up if you think caring less means trying less. Look around. See how many of you have been programmed to believe that desperation equals dedication. This programming is destroying your effectiveness. When you need something too badly, you become clumsy in pursuing it. When you're attached to winning, you fight scared. When you're desperate for approval, you perform below your capabilities. Your attachment creates the very tension that prevents you from achieving what you want. The ultimate fighter is not the one who wants to win the most mind. It's the one who is most prepared to lose everything while giving everything. This creates a mental state that is simultaneously relaxed and explosive, calm and dangerous, detached and totally committed. Think about your best performances in any area of life. Were you tense and worried about the outcome, or were you in a state of relaxed focus? Were you thinking about what might happen, or were you completely absorbed in what you were doing right now? Your peak moments always occur when you're fully present and unattached to results. Yet you spend most of your time in the opposite state. You're worried about tomorrow while missing today. You're attached to outcomes while neglecting the process. You're fighting imaginary battles in your head while real opportunities pass you by. The fighting spirit without the fight means bringing total intensity to your preparation and complete indifference to recognition. It means training like your life depends on it while being perfectly okay if no one notices. It means perfecting your craft with obsessive dedication while remaining unattached to external rewards. This is not contradiction. This is liberation. When you separate your effort from your need for specific results, you become free to give everything without holding back. When you disconnect your worth from your achievements, you become capable of attempting things that terrify others. Most people hold back because they're afraid of failure. They don't give their all because they want to keep some excuse in reserve. They perform at 70% so they can tell themselves they could have done better if they really tried. This self-protection mechanism guarantees mediocrity. The warrior mentality requires burning your boats, giving everything you have while expecting nothing in return, committing fully to the process while releasing all attachment to the outcome. This is terrifying for people who define themselves by their results, but liberating for those who define themselves by their effort. Your energy is finite. Every moment you spend worrying about results is energy you cannot invest in improving your performance. Every thought about what others might think is mental bandwidth you cannot use for innovation. Every emotion attached to outcomes is power you cannot channel into action. When you fight without attachment to winning, you become unpredictable. Your opponents cannot manipulate you through fear because you've already accepted every possible outcome. They cannot intimidate you with threats because you have nothing to protect. They cannot buy you with promises because you need nothing from them. This creates a psychological advantage that transcends technique or talent. While others are managing their emotions and protecting their ego, you're completely focused on execution. While they're fighting their own fear, you're fighting the actual challenge in front of you. The economy of emotional energy is brutal. Spend it on worry and you have less for action. Invest it in attachment and you have less for adaptation. Waste it on seeking approval and you have less for authentic expression. Every successful person intuitively understands this economy, even if they cannot articulate it. But you can do more than understand it. You can master it. You can become someone who channels 100% of their energy into performance while channeling 0% into anxiety about results. This is not natural for most people. It must be trained like any other skill. Start with small battles. The next time someone cuts you off in traffic, practice immediate indifference. Don't waste energy being angry at someone who will never know they affected you. The next time someone doesn't return your call, practice releasing your need to control their behavior. Use these daily annoyances as training grounds for bigger challenges. Every time you catch yourself being emotionally hijacked by circumstances beyond your control, you have a choice. You can continue the pattern of caring too much about things that don't matter, or you can practice the warrior's response, complete focus on what you can control right now. The difference between amateur and professional is not talent or technique, it's mental discipline. The amateur gets emotionally involved with every setback, every criticism, every unexpected challenge. The professional processes information without being disturbed by it, adapts without complaining, and continues executing regardless of conditions. Which mindset are you training? Every day, every interaction, every challenge is either strengthening your warrior discipline or reinforcing your victim patterns. There is no neutral. You're either becoming more resilient or more fragile with each experience. The fighting spirit requires you to be simultaneously the most committed and the most detached person in any situation. Committed to excellence, detached from recognition. Committed to growth, detached from comparison. Committed to your values, detached from others' approval. This paradox confuses people because they've been taught that caring and trying are the same thing. They believe that to achieve something they must need it desperately. But desperation creates desperation. Need creates neediness. Attachment creates suffering. The master craftsman works on his art for hours every day, not because he needs external validation, but because the work itself is his reward. The master athlete trains with punishing discipline not because he's attached to winning, but because excellence is his standard. The master entrepreneur builds businesses not because he needs money, but because creation is his nature. When your motivation comes from internal standards rather than external validation, you become unstoppable. When your satisfaction comes from the process rather than the results, you become undefeatable. When your identity is based on your character rather than your achievements, you become unshakable. But this requires giving up the addiction to external validation that most people mistake for motivation. It requires finding your drive in places that others cannot touch. Your own commitment to growth, your own standards of excellence, your own vision of who you want to become. The crowd needs drama to stay engaged. They need winners and losers, heroes and villains, success and failure stories to feel something. But you are not performing for the crowd. You are not living your life as entertainment for others. You are not measuring your worth by their reactions. You are training yourself daily to be completely engaged in the present moment while completely unattached to future outcomes. This is the most difficult skill you will ever develop, and the most valuable. Everything else in your life will improve when you master this balance. The weak fighter is controlled by his emotions. The strong fighter controls his emotions. But the master fighter transcends emotions entirely. He uses them as information without being used by them. He feels everything without being disturbed by anything. When someone attacks your reputation, you can choose to defend it desperately or examine the criticism objectively. When someone rejects your proposal, you can take it personally or use it to improve your next attempt. When life doesn't unfold according to your timeline, you can resist what is or adapt to what is while maintaining your direction. This is the fighting spirit without the fight. You engage fully with every challenge while remaining internally free. You compete at the highest level while being perfectly okay with any outcome. You care deeply about your performance while caring nothing about external judgment. The transformation happens gradually, then suddenly. One day you realize that other people's opinions have lost their power over you. You notice that setbacks no longer devastate you. You observe that you're taking bigger risks because you have less to lose. You discover that you're more creative because you're not editing yourself for approval. This is when you become dangerous to mediocrity and attractive to excellence. People sense that you cannot be manipulated, controlled, or broken by circumstances. They recognize that you operate from a different level of internal strength. Some will want to learn from you. Others will want to tear you down. Your response to both will reveal how complete your transformation has become. The final test of this philosophy comes when you face your biggest challenges, when everything you've built is threatened, when people you trusted betray you, when life delivers its heaviest blows. This is when you discover whether you've truly internalized the fighting spirit without the fight. The untrained person crumbles because their strength was dependent on external conditions. The partially trained person struggles but eventually adapts. The master remains completely calm while taking decisive action, unattached to outcomes while totally committed to response. This level of internal strength cannot be faked or borrowed. It must be forged through consistent practice in daily situations. Every moment of choosing response over reaction, effort over outcome, presence over anxiety, is building the mental muscle that will serve you when stakes are highest. You've now reached the threshold where everything changes. You understand that caring less creates more happiness. You've learned that fierce action requires no attachment to results. But understanding is not mastery. Knowledge is not transformation. The gap between knowing and being is where most people live their entire lives. What separates the unstoppable from the everyone else? What makes certain people immune to circumstances while others are controlled by every shift in their environment? The answer will disturb you because it's so simple you'll want to complicate it. The unstoppable person has realized they were never broken. They don't need fixing, improving, or completing. They don't need anyone's permission, approval, or validation. They don't need specific outcomes to be okay. They are already whole, already complete, already free. They just forgot this truth and spent years trying to find outside themselves what was always within. How many of you believe you need something external to be happy? How many think you'll be okay when you get the relationship, the promotion, the recognition, the money? Raise your hand if you're waiting for your life to begin when conditions improve. Look around. See how many of you are postponing your own existence. This is the final prison belief that your completeness depends on circumstances. As long as you need anything from the outside world to feel whole, you remain controllable. As long as your peace depends on other people's behavior, you remain vulnerable. As long as your happiness requires specific outcomes, you remain weak. The art of becoming unstoppable is the art of realizing you need nothing to be everything you already are. Not positive thinking, not self-improvement, not better circumstances, nothing. You are already equipped with everything necessary for an extraordinary life. The problem is you've been looking everywhere, except where the treasure actually exists. Every technique you've learned, every strategy you've implemented, every philosophy you've studied has been pointing toward this single recognition: you are not lacking anything essential. Your suffering comes not from what you don't have, but from believing you need what you don't have. The moment this shifts from concept to reality, you become dangerous to everyone who profits from your insecurity. The advertising industry, the self-help industry, the relationship industry, they all depend on you believing you're incomplete. They need you to think happiness is always one purchase, one course, one relationship away. But when you realize you're already whole, their power over you vanishes instantly. When you understand that your worth is not negotiable, their manipulation tactics become transparent. When you recognize that your peace comes from within, their fear-based messaging becomes irrelevant. This is not philosophy. This is practical power. The person who needs nothing from others becomes magnetic to others. The person who requires no external validation becomes naturally confident. The person who depends on no particular outcome becomes capable of creating any outcome. Why? Because they're operating from fullness rather than emptiness, from strength rather than need, from choice rather than compulsion. They engage with life as an expression of their completeness, not as a desperate attempt to fill their emptiness. Think about the people you find most attractive, most inspiring, most magnetic. Are they the ones who need your approval, or the ones who are completely themselves regardless of your opinion? Are they the desperate ones seeking validation, or the self-contained ones who seem to need nothing from anyone? You already know the answer. You're naturally drawn to people who are complete within themselves because they remind you of your own forgotten wholeness. They're not performing for you, not seeking anything from you, not trying to manage your perception of them. This freedom is intoxicating because it reflects your own potential. Yet you spend your energy trying to become worthy of others' attention instead of remembering your inherent worth. You exhaust yourself seeking love instead of recognizing that you are love. You chase happiness instead of realizing that happiness is your natural state when you stop doing things that make you unhappy. The practices that create unstoppable people are not additions to your life, they're subtractions. Not adding more beliefs, but removing false ones. Not gaining more skills, but dropping limitations. Not becoming someone new, but remembering who you've always been underneath the conditioning. Every morning you wake up with a choice. You can spend the day trying to get something from the world, or you can spend it giving something to the world. You can approach each interaction asking, what can I get, or what can I give? You can measure success by what you accumulate or by what you contribute. The unstoppable person has made this choice permanently. They've shifted from taking to giving, from needing to providing, from consuming to creating. This shift changes everything because it places them in the position of power in every interaction. When you need nothing from others, you can afford to be generous. When you expect nothing from circumstances, you can appreciate everything that comes. When you require nothing from life, you become capable of enjoying whatever life offers. This is not resignation, nation. This is ultimate freedom. You're not giving up on goals, dreams, or ambitions. You're pursuing them from a position of strength rather than need. You're creating from overflow rather than emptiness. You're acting from choice rather than compulsion. The difference in results is dramatic. The person acting from need makes desperate choices. The person acting from completion makes powerful choices. The person seeking validation creates work that's safe and conventional. The person needing no validation creates work that's bold and original. Your creativity explodes when you stop caring if others understand it. Your relationships improve when you stop needing others to complete you. Your career accelerates when you stop requiring external recognition to feel successful. Your health improves when you stop using it to prove your worth. But the mind resists this simplicity. It wants complex solutions, elaborate systems, detailed plans. It cannot accept that freedom is available right now, that happiness is your default state, that you are already everything you've been seeking to become. This resistance is the final test. Can you be happy for no reason? Can you be confident without achievements to point to? Can you feel successful before you've accomplished your goals? Can you love yourself without conditions? Most people fail this test because they've been conditioned to believe that contentment without achievement is laziness, that confidence without proof is arrogance, that happiness without reason is delusion. They cannot imagine feeling good about themselves until they've earned it through external accomplishments. This backwards thinking keeps them trapped in the endless cycle of seeking, achieving, enjoying briefly, then seeking again. They mistake the temporary satisfaction of getting what they want for the permanent satisfaction of wanting what they have. The unstoppable person has broken this cycle completely. They want what they have while working toward what they want. They're grateful for what is while creating what could be. They're complete in the present while actively shaping their future. This creates a psychological state that is both deeply peaceful and intensely dynamic. They're simultaneously the most content and the most ambitious people you'll meet. Content because they need nothing to be happy. Ambitious because their actions come from inspiration rather than desperation. When your actions come from love rather than fear, from excitement rather than anxiety, from vision rather than need, everything changes. You take different risks, make different choices, create different results. You become unstoppable, not because nothing can stop you, but because there's nothing in you that can be stopped. The part of you that can be stopped is the part that needs specific outcomes. The part that can be discouraged is the part that requires external validation. The part that can be broken is the part that depends on circumstances being different than they are. But underneath all these vulnerable parts is something that cannot be touched by any external force. Call it your essence, your spirit, your true self. It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you remember it exists and learn to operate from this indestructible core. This is not metaphysical speculation. This is practical psychology. When you stop identifying with your temporary roles, fluctuating emotions, and changing circumstances, you tap into something that remains constant regardless of what happens around you. This constant something is what makes certain people seem immune to drama, unaffected by criticism, undisturbed by setbacks. They're not pretending to be strong. They're accessing a strength that exists beneath the surface level of personality and circumstance. The daily practice is simple but not easy. Each time you catch yourself needing something external to feel okay, you and reconnect with what's already okay within you. Each time you find yourself seeking validation, you remember that your worth is not up for debate. Each time you get attached to outcomes, you refocus on your effort and release the results. This practice must be consistent because the world is constantly trying to convince you that you're incomplete. Every advertisement, every comparison, every moment of self-doubt is an invitation to forget your wholeness and return to seeking. But each time you remember, the remembering becomes stronger. Each time you choose freedom over need, freedom becomes more natural. Each time you act from completeness rather than emptiness, completeness becomes your default state. The transformation is not dramatic, it's subtle, and then obvious. One day you realize that other people's moods don't control yours. You notice that setbacks don't devastate you anymore. You observe that you're taking actions based on your vision rather than your fears. You become someone who cannot be manipulated by guilt because you feel no guilt about being yourself. Someone who cannot be controlled by fear because you've accepted that everything is temporary. Someone who cannot be stopped by obstacles because you see them as part of the path rather than barriers to it. This is the art of becoming unstoppable, not by becoming invulnerable to life, but by becoming so aligned with life that resistance becomes unnecessary. You flow with what is while actively creating what could be. You accept what cannot be changed while changing everything that can be changed. The final realization is that you were always unstoppable. You just forgot, got distracted, believed the stories about limitation and lack, but nothing that happened to you, nothing you did or didn't do, nothing about your past or your circumstances has changed the fundamental truth. You are already free, already complete, already unstoppable. The only question remaining is, will you remember this truth and live from it, or will you continue seeking outside yourself what you already possess within yourself? The choice is always yours, and the choice is always now.